All right, welcome everyone. My name is Adam Ross. I'm with Florida Tennis, and you're on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. We are so lucky today to have the great Mary Joe Fernandez, former WTA player, broadcaster. We have so much to talk about and so much to get into in her background. Mary Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Adam. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for asking. So, as we begin this introduction, Mary Joe, I must start with showing our audience a couple of Mary Joe Fernandez tennis cards,
Oh my
okay?
goodness.
And one of them has a Mary Joe Fernandez trivia question. We will accept any answer since you're Mary Joe Fernandez. So we're gonna go. So this is the U.S. Olympic cards, 1992 U.S. Olympic hopefuls card. Okay,
Okay.
it's going in and out of the frame there. And this is the Mary Jo Fernandez Sports Illustrated for Kids card. Okay, this is I'm gonna read this and then ask you the trivia question. All right.
Okay.
In 1990, her first full year on the tennis circuit, Mary Jo raised her ranking from 12th in the world to 4th. During the year, Mary Jo reached the finals of the Australian Open and the semifinals of the French Open. At two other tournaments, she won both the singles and doubles titles. How many inches tall is Mary Jo? We'll accept any answer.
Gee, you threw me for a loop
I
there.
know. I told you there'd be no math, and I'm throwing math at you, and it didn't have anything to do with the preceding part. But if I can tell you if you want, it's up to you.
Okay, so I think I'm the same height I was then.
Okay.
So you're asking me in inches?
It says how many inches tall is Mary Jo? Yeah.
So I'm
And
gonna say 60. Was I like, I don't know, 60 and a half?
you're according to this, you were 71
Oh,
inches
wow, it was
tall,
taller.
which is
Okay.
5'11".
No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no,
Now this
no.
card, this other card says you're
That's fake news.
5'10". This
No,
other
I was
card.
I was 5'9" and a half,
All right. Well,
I think.
as I said to our audience when we began, your answer is correct. Okay.
Okay,
You have
good, good. I
passed.
definitely was
You have
not I
you have
definitely was not
passed.
5'11". I
You have
wish, but no.
And as I said, I'm gonna kind of run through this a little bit, but I am fascinated. Your middle name, Joe, Joe. What is the origin of your middle name?
Okay, so my mom is from Cuba and my dad, he passed 5 years ago, but he was from Spain and his name was Jose. Um, so my name is in Spanish, Maria Jose, which is Mary Joe in English. That's where the Joe comes from. And that's why it has an E, because a lot of people spell it without the E. But Jose is a masculine name. And in Spain, it's actually very common to name females Maria Jose and then to name males Jose Maria backwards. So, anyway, that's where the Joe comes in. So,
Well,
it's not really a middle name, it's my first name.
thank you for tackling. That's right, Mary Jo. Okay. Um, Now, congratulations on being inducted into the Orange Bowl Tennis Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're going to be officially inducted at a ceremony on Wednesday, March 26th during the night
Mhm.
session of the Miami Open at Hard Rock Stadium. I look forward to being there.
Great.
I'm
Looking forward
excited.
to
I'm
it.
excited.
Yes, me too.
Um, let's start with what is the significance for those of our listeners and viewers who don't know? What's the significance of the Orange Bowl?
Well, for me, it was huge. I was really fortunate that the Orange Bowl at the time, and I still think today, was the biggest international junior event in the world.
Sure.
Um, for me, it was super fortunate that I lived in Miami and I grew up in Miami, so it was in my backyard. And when I started playing the junior Orange Bowl, and I want to say my first one, I was like 9 years old. I played in Coral Oaks, was the first one I ever played. Um, it was right before Christmas time, and I would go to watch the Orange Bowl and watch the finals usually with my parents, and I got to see great players come through and win it. I remember, I think it was 1980, I saw Susie Mascarin, another American, win the Orange Bowl. I think Matt Spielander maybe had won it the year before on the men's side. And little by little, I started to understand the history of all the great players that had come through and had played. And at the time, it was played at the 16s and 18s. The Orange Bowl was played at the Flamingo Park. And we'd play the junior one, and then we'd go watch, the finals of the other one. And I had a great group of peers that I played against. So I want to say it must have been maybe 81 or so, 12 and unders in Salvador Park. I played Steffi Graf in the
Wow.
semis. Steffi played Gabriela Sabatini in the finals. I played one of the Maleva sisters for third place.
Oh my goodness.
So it was just such a great, group of players that kept coming through, and it just continued, and I ended up playing Gabriela the following year in the 14s in the semis, and then moved over to Flamingo. So I just remember the great history of it, the great players that had come through and had done so well. And for me, again, I think really fortunate that maybe it was easier because it was at home for me. So I didn't view it as, oh my gosh, I have to travel and I'm away, a few days right before Christmas. Like I was home, and, my family and my friends would come support and watch me. And I ended up having great success, and it was a stepping stone for me in my career.
For many players, obviously the Orange Bowl is just a huge seminal event if they're able to win that. I'm curious. I know I've met your mom. I don't think I had the pleasure of meeting your father, unfortunately.
Mhm.
I know it's a very close-knit family. Was there a tennis background? How did you become a great junior player and then, of course, a great professional player?
So there wasn't really a huge tennis background. I think my
Mhm.
dad played socially growing up in Spain. He played more soccer than anything else. My mom never played tennis, didn't really know a lot about it. But I have an older sister, Sylvia. She's named after my mom, who is 10 years older than I am, and she played a little bit of tennis. And that's really why I started. I started because she played,
Right.
and my dad would take me to practice with her. She had scoliosis, which is a back
S-
spine
mhm.
condition,
Sure.
and she had to wear this brace from her neck to her hip. And the doctor said, if she could do some sports, maybe some tennis to strengthen the muscles around her spine, that would be good for her. And my dad would take her after school every day, and I would tag along. And he cut back then there were no little rackets. So he cut a little racket for me, shaved the grip down, and he was like, go against the wall, go against the fence, and entertain yourself for an hour until I'm done with your sister. And I did that every day. And I would come home and I'd hit against like the refrigerator, and I would, hit against the wall. My parents were like, stop that noise, stop that noise. But when I was 5 or 6, there was a local pro from Peru at the public courts we used to play at in Kendall Lakes. And he came up to my dad. He goes, I've been watching your daughter play. I'd really like to give her lessons. And my dad thought he meant my sister. And he's like, no, she's just playing because of her back issues, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, no, no, the little one. I've been watching her against the
The little one.
fence. She has good eye-hand coordination. So my dad's like, sure, take her. And that's how it all started.
That is incredible. It's not often I can interview a tennis player and say, this is the only person to do this. It's very rare. If I ever get to interview Rafa, 14 times French Open, I got that one in my bag. I'm ready.
Yep, yep.
But you are the only person, to win all
Mm.
four age groups of the Orange Bowl in consecutive years. You won the girls 12s when you were 11,
Mhm.
the girls 14s at 12, the girls 16s at 13, and the girls 18s at 14. It's really an unprecedented feat that remains, unmatched in the history of junior tennis. And I think I'm pretty confident in saying I don't think anyone's ever going to do this. But
You never know, you never know.
and what I'm going to add one more thing because you're the youngest player to win a main draw match at the U.S. Open. Um, so I'm going to get to my point in a second. But how old were you, if you recall, when you won that main draw match? I didn't
So
tell you there'd
I
be trivia on this.
think I know. I think I had just turned 14. My
You're right.
my, my birthday's August 19th.
Okay, you are correct. You're
So
14 years and 8 days
yeah,
old. So good.
yeah.
Who did you beat in that first round match?
I remember I played a woman from Great Britain. Her name was Sarah Gomer. She was 6'3" lefty with a huge serve.
Wow.
Yeah, and I do remember that because it was my first time playing at the US Open. I remember I had to play second match on after a men's match, and that was the first time I didn't go into a match knowing what time I played. Like normally you have a set
Sure.
time in the juniors, you play at 3 o'clock, whatever. And the match before me went 5 hours.
Wow.
And I warmed up like so many different times. I ate so many different times. I was like, oh my goodness, this is strange. But yeah, I remember that well.
All of this leads me to a question about the fact that we see people peak at different ages, and um, how were you so unbelievably mentally strong at such a young age? I mean, it's extraordinary to me.
Yeah, it was one of my strengths for sure, my mental toughness. And, I grew up in a time where Chrissy Everett and Bjorn Borg were two of the top players in the world. And I modeled my game after Chrissy, and she was so mentally tough, and it was all about consistency and not missing.
Sure.
And that's sort of how, I learned. I had a lot of discipline. Um, and I don't know that that's something you can totally teach all the time, but I definitely had it from a young age where I went out there and I played every point and, didn't get too rattled, didn't get too down on myself, just kind of stayed present. And at that time, everybody was young. I was not an exception to the
Okay.
rule. Like that, like I said, the Steffi, I think a year after that 12 and under Orange Bowl, she was already playing pro at 13. So it was Gabby and a lot of other players. So at that time, it was more the norm to do well when you were young. And I never in my mind, I guess, had that intention that I was going to be a professional. But again, the Orange Bowl is sort of what led me down that road. My parents were huge on education. And I remember
Sure.
when I won the last Orange Bowl at 14, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, she needs to go pro, drop out of school." I was only a freshman in high school, and my parents like, "Absolutely not. That's not going to happen. Mary Joe, you can play on the pro tour a little bit, but you're finishing school." And I'm really happy when I look back now that I did that and I had that experience, and I think it kept me grounded and it kept me a bit focused, because when I played tennis, I knew I didn't have as much time as everybody else had to practice. So I had a lot of intensity. And then I knew when I was in school, I couldn't goof off. I had to really pay attention and study and get good grades and the whole thing. So I was lucky because my school in South Florida was Carrollton and Sacred Heart School, all girls, and they were super supportive. And the teachers always helped me when I missed school and stuff like that. But education came first. But my peers like Steffi and Gabby, they were playing, full time and doing great. They took off. Like they won the Orange Bowl, and Gabby won the 18s when I won the 16s. And I remember people saying, "Well, why didn't you play the 18s?" And I remember my dad saying, "Why would you? You didn't win the 16s. You better play the 16s first." But she was that good that early.
Amazing. Now I don't know if you're okay with me just mentioning your son. Is that okay to talk about him for
Sure,
oh, great.
sure.
Okay. I'm really curious because you're an ex, it comes full circle. You're a mom, then you become a tennis parent. And I have seen you watch your son play, and I know he's a successful player what do I want to say, Stanford.
Yeah.
You got a Dartmouth sign behind you for your daughter.
Yeah.
So
So my
I
daughter,
got kind
okay,
of lost for a
so
second.
yeah, so don't forget my daughter actually played
Okay,
tennis at the beginning. So I love tennis. I mean, tennis has
right.
been my life, my passion. It's afforded me so many great things. I've met so many wonderful people, including my husband, through the sport. So it was never a question that I was going to have both children play tennis.
Okay.
That was always, part of my plan. But at the same time, would introduce them to a lot of different sports and see if they liked any of them. When we had children, it was never a question that they both were going to be introduced to tennis. Both my husband and I love the sport, are passionate about it, and we were always going to have them play. So my daughter was born in 2001, at the end of 2001, and I think I had a racket in her hand by the time she was 3 or 4, and I would take her out there and feed her balls and the whole thing. And she was actually pretty good.
Right.
Played a few tournaments, and quickly she was like, "I don't like this, mom. I don't like the cheating. I don't like if somebody beats me that they say that they beat Mary Joe's daughter. Like that stuff really bothered her." So I said, "That's fine." I said, You don't have to play tennis, full time, but it's such a great sport that I want you to have the skill level that one day when are older, you might fall in love with someone that plays tennis and you're going to want to know how to play tennis. So I would love if you played a couple times a week. And that's what she did for a while. And she ended up, when she was about to be a freshman in high school, saying to me, Mom, I think I want to try out for the tennis team. And we lived in Cleveland, Ohio, um, throughout, when the children were little. And the school she went to had an amazing tennis team. They were all like ranked players. So I said, okay, Bella, if you want to get on this team, I mean, you're going to have to work. Like, this is not going to be easy. So I remember during the summer, for every day, she was like, okay, let's go practice, let's go practice. And she worked so hard. So she worked super hard, gets on the team, gets like the last spot on the team. And she ended up winning state championship one year and got to the finals the next year in doubles. And she just loved the whole team aspect of it. She had friends on the team, so she had a ball. But her main sport ended up being lacrosse. And
Wow.
that's what she played mainly. And that's what she ended up playing at Dartmouth. But anyway, so at the same time, I have her brother, Nico, who was tagging along. And I was putting him in clinics and feeding him balls as well. But I wasn't paying that much attention to him. I was paying more attention to his sister. And I remember one of the pros they would play with would say to me, you should put him into tournaments too. I was like, no, he's too little. No, he's ready. And he just loved it. Like, he just couldn't get enough of it. And he reminded me of me when I was little, because I didn't have a basement in South Florida, but in Cleveland, we had a basement, and he would go down and he would hit against the wall after school, or at night after dinner. And I was like, oh my gosh, he loves it so much. So I was thrilled, so happy. And I've been super excited that he's loved it as much, as I have. And he's had a great junior career. And we're so excited that he's at Stanford. He's a sophomore there playing for the team, and he just loves it. So of course, the connection to the Orange Bowl is, a dream come true that he was able to even play. I was so excited. I brought out one of my best coaches, early coaches, Don Petrine.
Sure, I know Don. Great
to
man.
watch Nico play his very first Orange Bowl. I think Nico was probably like 10. And, he came out and supported him, and he still supports him. And it's been a lot of fun. I get really nervous watching him, but it's been all worth it.
Now, that's wonderful. Now, I know your husband, Tony, obviously has tennis connections.
Yes.
He's involved a smidge in the game. Obviously, for those who don't know, Tony is an agent, an Uber agent. I actually asked him if he was, I had to ask him if he was representing any big time players last time I saw him. And he laughed. He did laugh. But for those who don't know, I mean, the roster includes a guy named Roger Federer, Juan Martín del Potro. I mean, I can go on and on, but it's pretty impressive. But I'm curious, you mentioned meeting him in the tennis world. So how did that come about?
Okay, so Tony went to work right out of college, and he went to Dartmouth too, by the way. Right out of Dartmouth, he went to work for IMG, one of the biggest management companies in the world. I was managed by IMG at the time.
Right.
And it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, was he your agent? I'm like, no, he was 14 when I turned pro. He was in high school. But anyway, he goes to work at IMG, and that's how I meet him. He was at the US Open. He was working with Monica Seles, at the time. And we started, I think, dating in 96, and we got married in 2000. We're about to celebrate our 25th anniversary next month. So it's been great. And he loves tennis as much as I do. He's had an incredible career. He's managed the best of the best. I mean, you mentioned Roger, but he managed Monica, one of our dearest friends, one of my best friends, Lindsay Davenport as well, one of my closest friends. Then he started Team 8, his own management company. Sure. And it's going great. They have Ben Shelton and Coco Gauff right now. So it's been great. We really, truly love the sport. And like I said before, it's like given us so much. So it's been wonderful.
I think they have this little thing called, I think it's a Laver Cup.
Yes.
A little tiny event. I was lucky enough to attend one in Chicago. Wow, it's
been a great event. Yeah, it's been exciting. It's the Ryder Cup of tennis. And bringing rivals to play as teammates has been, I think, a great formula. For me, one of the highlights was watching Roger and Rafa on the same side of the net playing doubles together for the first
Sure.
time, and then even watching Roger play with Novak. I thought that was so cool. But every year gets bigger and better, and the players seem to really thrive and play some of the best tennis. So it's been great.
I don't have a lot of Tony Godsick stories, obviously, but I do have one, and this is just an anecdote, one of my favorite, to show how humble the both of you are. I think Nico was playing at Veltri Tennis Center in the Orange Bowl.
Hmm.
I think maybe been playing doubles, but I think it was the COVID year when he was playing, and
Okay.
only one parent could go in at a time. And I took a triple take because I think it was Tony like peering through a fence, and I'm thinking, is that Tony Godsick, Roger Federer's agent, staring through a fence? Even he can't get in. That is
Yeah.
classic. Was I imagining that, or
No,
was that?
that was right. That those were tough days, strict rules.
No.
And yeah, at Veltri, there's those two courts that are kind of in the parking
Hmm.
lot. And Nico actually played, I want to say, some of his matches there, and he played I think he played the finals of the doubles that he won with Ethan Quinn there.
Yeah.
So we were lucky to be able to watch it through the fence.
I love that because I could just see playing the right, hey, I'm Roger Federer's agent
Yeah,
card. I'm
no, no,
going in.
no. We're
That's
I
not
have to
you.
say, Tony probably more than me, but we're very much rule followers.
Love
We don't
that.
like to break any rules.
I love that. So your highest singles ranking is number four in October of 1990, and you reached number four in doubles too. But I just happened to take a look at some of the players that were around at that time. Like number one at that time was Steffi Graf. Number two is Monica Seles. I mean, this is a murderer's row. Number three is Martina Navratilova. Right behind you is Gabby Sabatini. Then behind her is Katerina Maleva. Then a little player named Narancha Sanchez Vicario. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, and someone named Jennifer Capriati, Manuel Maleva, Zena Garrison. Wow. I mean, this is a tough, tough group. No, I mean, this is a rough group.
Yeah, it my whole career, I felt like I had the best of the best. I mean, when I first started at 14, Chrissy and Martina were at the top of the game, so I got to play the two legends. What a thrill to be able to have that opportunity. And then Steffi and Monica, dominated for a while, and I was able to play them. And then you had Lindsay Davenport, you had Martina Hingis, you had Arancha, you mentioned Gabby. The Maleva sisters were great, and then I ended my career playing the Williams sisters. So I feel lucky and unlucky because the great runs I ended up having at Grand Slam events, I ended up having to face Steffi and Monica, which was the biggest challenge at the time.
Well, it's funny you said that because we asked Grigor Dimitrov last year at the Miami Open if he regretted having to play Novak and Andy Murray and Roger Federer because he could have won more, and he had a very interesting answer. He said, "Not in the least." He said, "Those are some of the greatest memories I have. They made me better players." Do you feel the
Totally.
same way about playing some of the greats?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they make you better. They make you improve. And you know, do I wish maybe I would have had somebody else in one of the finals? Yes. So I'm not going to say that,
Right.
I'm glad that I had them every single time, but no, they pushed me, and I improved because, they were in front of me.
Well, let's talk about your Grand Slam finals for a second. In 1990, you play Steffi Graf at the Australian Open. You play Monica Seles in 1992. And then at the French Open in 1993, you take Steffi Graf to three sets, winning the first set. Um, Take us through anything you want about any of these matches, what it's like to play those finals, what it's like to play those players. Please, I'd love to hear
Sure.
that. So,
Um, so the first one, I had just finished high school. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't have an excuse anymore, that I'm still in school and I can't practice as much. Like now I better do well. So I get to the finals of Australia, and I really didn't go into it thinking I had a chance. I really went into it hoping to perform well. And I even think that next time I played Monica was a little bit of the same. I never truly believed that I could win. And I think that's something that's changed as the years went on. with the next generation, they had this like, inner belief that they could win even the first time around. The 93 final at the French was the first time I went into the match with real belief. I had had a really good spring. I had played Steffi close at some of the previous tournaments, and at the French, I had had really good results. So I finally went into that one thinking, okay, it's my turn, and that's the only match, Adam. If you ask me, if I look back, that I still, wish had turned out differently. I mean, that's the one that I was up 4-2 in the third, and I thought I had it. And Steffi always rose to the occasion. She always played
Right.
better when she was down, and I knew that because it had happened already before. And I decided to play more aggressively. I said I'm not going to let her be the one, that
Sure.
whatever. And I missed a little bit more than I normally would, and I lost. So, but that one is the one I wish I could have won because I did. That's the one I really thought, okay, I'm ready. This is what I'm ready to do.
I've heard Andy Roddick discuss what it's like playing the greats.
Excuse me.
Oh, you're okay.
Mhm.
Hope you're all right. Do you need a drink of water or anything?
No, no, I'm good. I'm
Okay.
good.
I've heard Andy Roddick talk about what it's like playing the greats, playing Roger, playing Rafa, that you have to almost take more chances than you want to. And they take you out of your comfort zone, and what people characterize as unforced errors are really not unforced errors. They're errors you're making because your margins are just so small against these players. So I hope you've given yourself a little bit of a break as you look back at that, right?
Yes, definitely.
Right.
And I realized had I just played a little more conservatively, she probably was gonna, do what she always did, which was, dictate and hit big forehands and win. So I felt like I did do the right things. I
Sure.
wish they'd gone in at the right time. They didn't. Um, and it just didn't, she's one of the greatest players to ever play. And she was one of my good friends as well. So, it was tough, but again, comparing the three, that was the one that I definitely went into it thinking, okay, this could be the one.
Any memories of what it was like to play Martina Navratilova?
Martina was so tough for me. She came in all the time. The lefty serve was so challenging. Um, I always felt like even whether it was Martina or Chrissy, like you could play well, but you still lost, 6-3, 6-2, because they did so many things so well. So there was always constant pressure when you played Martina. You didn't feel like you had a lot of room to breathe because if you missed your first serve, she was coming in. She served and volleyed. It was tough. It was a different game style coming from the juniors. You never really saw too many players play like that. So that was hard. And then playing Chrissy, besides having to deal with having to play my idol, which was a challenge in itself, she didn't miss the ball and she hit everything, a couple feet from the lines. And you felt like you were playing well, but same thing. You, at the end of the day, would fall behind and the match would be 6-3, 6-2.
Now, Kim Cleese just recently discussed before she won the big match, people said she was too nice, and you seem really nice. And I
Thank
know
you.
you.
I
You
appreciate
are
that.
really nice.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. And but Kim Cleese said that had nothing to do with the fact that she had a killer instinct, and obviously to get to number 4 and to be, slam finals and win all those
Mhm.
matches in juniors, you had a killer instinct. Obviously came up against some tough players, but I love the fact that you were able to maintain sportsmanship and be nice, and even have Monica Seles, I guess, as a bridesmaid at your wedding. I
Yes,
mean, she
yes.
beat you in the final. I'm
I
trying to picture
know.
Johnny Mack and Yvonne Lendl. I don't see Johnny Mack being the best man at Yvonne Lendl's wedding. So how do you do that?
Well, it's funny because that was one of my biggest criticisms is, oh, she's good, but she doesn't have the killer instinct. And for a while, like I thought about it and I kept thinking, geez, like, how do you get the killer instinct?
Sure,
I actually don't think I ever really had it. I was just a great competitor. And like we talked about earlier, I was tough mentally. I
sure.
never gave up, um, and all that. But it wasn't until I met Roger that I realized, that's kind of fake news. You don't have to have the killer instinct to be good because he's the nicest person I've ever met. I mean, he's just so kind and generous, and I never felt like that's something that he possessed. And look how well he did. So I think Kim is another great example. I'm not sure that, maybe she'll say maybe somewhere deep, but she's so nice. So I think you can be really nice and do well. You don't have to, you know, want, be
I
that high strung all the time and have that competitiveness at all times.
Not that you need me to agree with you completely, but I agree with you completely. It's a misnomer. You don't get to your level. And let's not forget Madison Keys, the
Totally.
nicest player. And I will shameless plug on the cover of our
Oh,
latest Florida Tennis.
how
But
popular was that victory this year?
it's it may be the story of the year. And let me ask you, just the nicest person, and the ridiculous knock on her that she can't win the big one because she's too nice. I mean, come on. How
Agreed.
great was
I
that?
was really lucky to have her on my Fed Cup and Olympic teams,
Hmm.
and she's one of my favorites. She's so nice and works so hard. So to see her come through was awesome.
Yeah, it was emotional. I mean, it was emotional.
Excuse me.
No, you're okay.
Uh,
If you need some water or a mint or
I'm okay.
something, go ahead. Okay. Well, you actually segued into a great area for me because I was going to ask you. You win the gold medal in doubles in '92 and '96 with your partner Gigi Fernandez. Bronze in singles at the '92 Olympics. You helped the U.S. win the Fed Cup, now the Billie Jean King Cup, '96 and '99. You serve as the Fed Cup captain 2008 to 2016, captain the U.S. Olympic tennis team in 2012 and 2016. I ran through that quickly, but here's the question. Obviously, it's important for you to represent the United States of America. Why?
Mhm. I've always been super patriotic. Um, I came here when I was 6 months old. I learned how to walk, how to talk, how to play
Right.
tennis, everything here. And,
Sure.
you know, to me, it's the best country in the world. So it was always important, if ever asked, to represent, to be there. And
Sure.
whenever I had that opportunity, I did it, and being able to do it on the other side of it and give back, as Fed Cup captain and the Olympic captain, that was, geez, another level of a dream come true. So, really fortunate to have those experiences. I mean, the Olympics, is something that sets itself apart, and you have to kind of pinch yourself when you're there to really believe it. And winning the medals was icing on the cake, and listening to the American anthem being played was incredible. Um, and even just walking opening ceremonies day, with the best of the best. And you realize, in tennis, we're really lucky because we have a tournament the next week. I remember all these other athletes saying,
Right.
geez, if it doesn't work out, I got to wait another 4 years. And here we are going to the Canadian Open the week after. So it made you appreciate the sport that we're in, but also just so emotional knowing that you're contributing, to your country.
Well, also going back in time, if this was a TV show, it would get kind of wavy right now as we go back in time. You were on the first cover
Oh, we don't need to show that.
of
We don't need
Florida
to show
Tennis.
that.
All right, all right, all right. You're on the first cover of Florida Tennis, and I have
Yes.
to, and that was March of 1992. How did that come about? How did you get onto the cover of Tennis? And of course, all of this is going to, well, I was going to ask you about the motorbike pose that you don't want to talk about, but a number of things, including your relationship with Jim Martz, who passed away on December 30th, 2023. So I want to hear about Jim, your White
Mhm.
House visit with Jim Martz. I'm combining a lot of questions. And one of my favorite moments when your mother requested a signed copy of the magazine when at the US when you were given the USTA Florida Hall of Fame award. That was one of my favorite moments. So please
Yes.
hit any part of that if you
Well,
can.
Jim Martz, one of the greatest people, I've known, was there from the start of my career. He covered my career right from the beginning. Such a sweet man, such a kind man. And I believe he wrote that article, right? He wrote the article
Yeah,
for
so
that.
so he was the founder of Florida Tennis, but I think the genesis of it all was, if I recall, he had written an article about you in high school for a high school sports magazine.
Right. And that's why we got to go to DC.
Yeah, to
Yes.
the
And I
White House.
remember I was the first one on the cover, and we were going to present it to, I believe it was President Reagan at the time, but he
Correct.
got called away, and we ended up presenting it to Vice President, George Bush. And we went in to see him, and it was a highlight. I mean, I was
Sure.
13. I think I was 13. And I remember my mom came with us, and yeah, we were in his office. We gave him the magazine. And then I realized and learned how big a tennis
Sure.
family the Bush family is. Ironically, I just ran into Marvin Bush.
Okay.
Went to watch my son play at UVA, and he was there. And I grew up with Jeb Bush. He played tennis
Amazing.
as well, so it all came around. But it was quite the experience. One that Jim and I talked about for years. We'll never forget that. It was very very special.
It was a huge moment for Jim, but I always thought it was amazing that it was you, I think your mom and your dad, then you invited Jim, and it meant the world to him. He had this shelf in his of course Jim Martz, the founder, editor, and original publisher of Florida Tennis Magazine, which has
Yes.
been around for about 32 years now. Fortunately, we lost Jim, as I mentioned, but he talked about it. He had this wall of like kind of great wall of pictures, and it was you, and he's got the one where he's in the office with George Bush, and I think he had actually asked George Bush if he wanted to play tennis on the White House court. He
It
took
probably
he
did.
did he did he was so it was quite important to him, and as I said, showing your mom that first cover and having her ask for a signed copy, I thought was a great, I don't know, it was just something awesome about that. As if she
Yeah,
couldn't
no,
get your
he was
autograph,
great.
at home, you know. So we're heading towards the end here, which I know you're not feeling 100%. So thanks for getting through it
I
so
just had
far.
this cough.
Sure.
I'm
And
good. I'm good.
I'm going to let you rest soon, but let's talk about your post WTA career. I'm not going to say your post tennis career because you have a thriving tennis career, but your post WTA career. Um, you become an incredible broadcaster, and you told a funny story.
Thank you.
Thank you, because it's tremendous to watch you, and I learn from you all the time. So you're doing amazing stuff. But I remember you told a little story about kind of your first experience, and I think your husband had stepped in. And if you want to retell that, it's fine. If not, you can just talk about. It was a great story about.
Yes, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think my first Australian Open, it was a year after I retired in 2000. I get down there, I'm really nervous. And at the time we were doing the matches tape delayed because of the time change. And the match I was covering there was a rain delay. So we took a break and they were going to close the roof and come back out. And I remember our producer got in our ear and said, "Listen, we're going to put this together. So I don't want you to talk about the rain. I don't want to talk about the roof being closed. Like we're going to put it together. Just, carry on." And that was one thing that was tricky while you were commentating, learning how to pause and listen to people talking to you while you were still speaking. So that was tricky in the beginning. But of course, within the first 10, 15 minutes of the match, starting again, I mentioned that it rained and that the roof was closed because the match changed.
Sure,
The
the
person who
conditions
was losing,
change.
and the person
Yeah.
who was losing started to win. And the producer gets so upset, starts yelling at me.
Wow.
And I was like, oh no. Anyway, I don't think I said a word the rest of the match. I got back to see my husband, and he says to me, "How'd it go? How was your first day?" And I said, "Oh, I don't think this is for me." He goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I just left a really stressful profession, and I don't need another one." I go, "This is too much stress. I really messed up and blah, 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 blah." So he knew the producer and he called him. He said, "What happened?" He's like, "Oh, first day and this and that." Anyway, the next day he told me, "I'm sorry I yelled at you." And all is good. So that was my first introduction to TV.
So in the latest issue of Florida Tennis, I had the privilege of interviewing Leslie Visser, Hall of
Yes.
Fame broadcaster, and just broke every glass ceiling there was, like the first woman in a locker room through the Boston Lobsters, and I mean it was just an incredible interview. I just think the world of her, and she told a extremely funny story. It's kind of apropos where it was early on in her broadcasting career, and she was at the U.S. Open, and Brent Musburger pushed her on to do an on-court interview that wasn't, and she gets on there, and it's Hannah Montlikova, who has a relatively strong accent, and
Yes.
she
Yes.
said, and Leslie said to her, "To what do you attribute this victory?" And she said, "My couch." And Leslie said, "You got new furniture?" Because she thought, wow, she's sleeping really well on this new couch. And she said, "No, my coach,
My coach.
Betty
That's
Stova,
funny.
Betty Stova." So it was a
That's
great story.
funny.
So it happens to the best of them. Um, we're going to conclude kind of. I just want just a couple more thoughts on the closeness of you or your family to Roger Federer's family. Um, I'm an immense Roger Federer fan as well. I guess I'm not the only one, I have a feeling.
Mhm.
Um, you've witnessed some iconic moments. I mean, you're in the room when he announces his retirement. I know this from a documentary I saw.
Right,
You're
right.
on court at that emotional Laver Cup retirement speech with his
Yes.
daughters crying. Gonna get choked up. Don't get me for Clem. He does just a brilliant commencement speach for your daughter at
Yes.
Dartmouth. I mean, it's like, what can't this guy do? I mean, it was like
Mhm.
it's a kind of speech where it'll be written and quoted for years. Um,
Mhm.
he and Mirka and they seem so grounded, and your family seems so grounded. So, are they just kind of like family to you and just friends, and they're not?
Definitely.
Yeah,
It's rare. I mean, it's a rare thing to find, I guess, but like I said earlier, he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. I mean, he's one of the best human beings I think I've ever known. I always said my brother-in-law was the best person I ever met. Unfortunately, he passed
I'm
away
sorry.
5 years ago, and now the best one I know is probably Roger because he's always thinking about others first, and his wife is incredible, and they have 4 beautiful children. Um, and yes, I mean, I don't even know how long it's been now. I guess 20 years. But they've become family for sure, and it's beautiful. Everybody gets along really well. My children adore his children, and um, yeah, it's a rare thing. I remember when my husband started working with him, and he spent some time with him in Europe, and he called me. He's like, "Oh my gosh, Mary Joe, you're not gonna believe this. Like, this is the greatest family I've ever met, and this and that." And I said, "Oh, Tony, it's a business. Don't get too attached. You know how it goes and whatever." He's like, "No, no, no, no. This is different. This is different." And sure enough, it was different. And I remember asking his wife the first time I got to spend time with him. I asked his wife, Mirka, I said, "Is he always this nice? Is he always this thoughtful?" I mean, he was asking me if I needed a card to the tennis, if I needed a sweater right before the match. And his wife said to me, I'll never forget, he says, "When you meet his mom, you'll understand why." And he was just raised really well. He has phenomenal parents, and they kept him down to earth, grounded. So yeah, really, really lucky to have him in our lives. And it's been it was so much fun watching him succeed and do everything he did on the court. And he continues to do so much now. His foundation, he's helped a
Sure.
lot of children, and he's just a wonderful person.
I was just about to say, I suspect his parents and your parents would have been simpatico.
Yes,
That they
yes.
they would have really gotten along, and they love their families and raised them right. And on that incredibly positive note, I want to wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Congratulations again for your induction into the Orange Bowl Tennis Hall of Fame. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule when you're not feeling
Uh,
100% to do the
no,
Florida
it's
Tennis
okay. I
podcast.
appreciate it, Adam. Thank you for having me.
It's been my
You do
pleasure.
an awesome job. Keep it
Well,
up.
thank you. And I'm going to ask to you promise you will come back sometime in the future. We'll call it
Of
second
course.
serve
Let's do it.
because Mary Jo, this has been just one of the highlights of for me. I just had a
You're
great
so
time. So
sweet. You're
thank
so
you.
sweet. Thank you,
Thank you so
Adam.
very much. It has been an absolute joy and wish you all the best.
Thank you.